On tonight's menu for Good Eats, we're going to be doing some shepherd's pie. Tried to limit the amount of filler that we have in there, so I went ahead and I took 2 pounds of ground beef. You want to use lean beef, and I already browned it. Now you don't want to over brown it. You can see that it's still slightly pink because we don't want to overcook it because otherwise it's going to be dry. Anyways, what I do is I take 2 tablespoons of butter. Again, I prefer Kerrygold, which you can find in most most grocery stores now, but that's grass-fed butter for grass-fed cows. They claim it's better. I don't know if it's true or not, but I know it tastes better. So I use 2 tablespoons of Kerrygold. I throw it into my pan. I put it on a medium-high heat, and then I take about a baseball-sized onion, peel it real quick, and then I get my grater out and I grate it real fine into the butter, and start sauteing the onions, and then I put my meat on top of it and then brown up my meat. And again, it's still slightly pink because we're going to bake it. The other thing that you need to do is peel your potatoes, and we're going to make mashed potatoes with that. I peel my potatoes strictly because my kids won't eat them with the skin on, but if you're using like your gold or yellow potatoes or your Idaho red potatoes, all you have to do is just boil them till they're nice and tender, and you can mash them up with the skins on, and then it even looks even neater once you have it prepared and prepped. But if there's skins in the mashed potatoes, my kids won't eat them, so I have to peel them. Anyways, what you're going to do is you're going to brown your beef. I again did not add any water. I just strictly butter and onion, and you can see all the juices down there. And we want to just transfer that into our pan. Try to preserve the juices that you have because we're going to use that to make a bit of gravy later on. So we transfer our browned meat into our pan. And I always do the onion with the meat just because I think fresh onion seasons the meat and brings out the flavor of the beef so very much. And I always grate my onion because I have a lot of people who don't like the texture of the onion, not necessarily the flavor, but the texture itself. So if they sense onion or cooked onion, whether cooked or raw in their food, they just won't eat it. But if you shred it up enough, nobody's going to even know that it's in there. So you get your pan out. You're just going to coat the bottom of the pan with your browned beef. Alright, we're going to take our pan, throw that back up onto the stove, and we want vegetables. You can take your pick of vegetables. This time I'm going to be using 3. I got peas, carrots, and corn. So I'm going to add my peas, my carrots, and my corn to the mix. And we'll mix that up. Of course, if you have fresh vegetables, they always make things taste better, but it's just easier for me to use canned, so we're using canned vegetables in this recipe. Spread this around for a little bit. Get that going right there. Alright, now we're going to start spicing this up. What we're going to use is a ½ teaspoon salt. You don't want to use too much because the mashed potatoes are also going to have salt in them. ½ teaspoon of salt. I'll spread that around. I use a ½ teaspoon of coarse ground black pepper. I use a heaping teaspoon. I'll spread that around. I want a $1/4 teaspoon garlic powder. And about 1 tablespoon of basil. And if you remember from my previous videos, when you're dealing with basil, oregano, and other leafy spices, you want to hand crush those. So about a tablespoon of basil. And I'm going to use my fingers and actually crush and roll them around to really bring out the flavor. I'm just going to coat this pan. We just got to be careful and mix this all up real good. Really get those spices spread around. Once we're good and spread out, a really good mix right there. We're going to move over and we can start making our mashed potatoes. Now, I chop up the potatoes and start to boil them. When they start to roll inside the boiling water is how I know basically when they're done. And you can almost overcook or overboil the potatoes when you're making mashed potatoes, because essentially if you undercook them, that's how you end up with lumpy potatoes. But you're going to strain your potatoes. And I like to use the same pot that I had previously. I transfer them back into the same pot that they just came from. Now with your mashed potatoes, again, we're going to use a little more garlic powder. So once again, we're going to go to a 1/4 teaspoon. And you use a heaping teaspoon of garlic powder. Spread that around on your potatoes. Again, 1/4 teaspoon salt. You want to use a stick of butter, margarine, or whatever it is. This is 1 stick. It is about a 1/2 cup. I know it sounds a lot, but when you're dealing with quite a few potatoes, it really brings out the flavor. Some people like to add milk. I personally do not like to add milk to my potatoes. In fact, my secret ingredient is to be placed in 1 moment. We'll drop in our butter. And then here's my secret ingredient, Hellmann's mayonnaise. I like to use about a tablespoon to a tablespoon and a half. Just a good heaping tablespoon. Or a little bit more. That puts a nice zing or zest into your mashed potatoes. Now get our potato masher and just mash those up. Really, you can see We don't need to add any milk. Those are going to be plenty creamy enough for our purposes. Right, there we go. Nice creamy mashed potatoes. And what I did was I took my pan I'm going to use for making my nice gravy, transferred it over to a medium-high heat. I'm going to take 2 tablespoons of flour, throw that in there. Stir up your flour. I'm going to try to get it to get nice and clumpy. Once you got it nice and clumpy, you take it off the heat. We want to add 1 cup of beef broth to make us a nice gravy. Turn that back to the heat. Continue to mix vigorously. Basically, you just got to beat it until you get all the lumps out of it. Now, this is the same pan that I was using to cook my beef and onion in, so it's got that nice beef, onion, butter flavor, so I don't need to add salt, I don't need to add too much to this. I'm just going to keep on mixing it around until I get a nice thick gravy. Right about there. Now some of these lumps that are in here are little chunks of onion and still beef left over, but once you got a nice thick gravy, if you want it thicker, you can always add a little bit more flour to thicken it up. I think this is about as thick as I'm going to want to have this here. Shut off my stove top. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to add the gravy. Into our shepherd's pie. I'll go back, mix this around. We get nice, really wet gravy. And this is going to help distribute some of those spices that we have inside of there. And if you want to make more gravy, again, you can use an additional 2 tablespoons of flour and an additional cup of your beef stock or beef broth to help bring that in, but this, I think this looks plenty moist for what we have. Even out our surface here. Nice. I'm going to take a bag of shredded sharp cheddar. I want to put a nice thin layer. And depending on how much you like cheese, you can add extra cheese or just a nice even coat of cheddar. Bring that out. Now we're ready for our mashed potatoes that we're going to layer the top with. Even coat mashed potatoes. On top. Preheat your oven for 350 degrees. Once your oven dings and you're preheated, we're just going to take our shepherd's pie, move it into our oven for 20 to 25 minutes. At the end of 20 minutes, you have a perfectly made shepherd's pie. Now, of course, if you want to fancy it up, you can always take a blowtorch and brown the top of the mashed potatoes that you have on there. But that's my shepherd's pie recipe. Anyways, click like and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed the video.